Hello and welcome to the special 10th episode of Crontendo. That's 150 games so far. Sounds like a lot, but we've actually just barely scratched the surface of the Famicom releases. I wish I could say that this was a special episode, but it's actually just a pretty average selection of games this week. We will see a pretty good game from Hudson this episode, as well as the Famicom debuts of SNK and Victor. Also a surprisingly good game from Bandai, as well as more atrocities from Kemco and Toei. So we'll start this episode out with an original platformer from Taito. Let's kick off this episode with a game that probably most of you won't be familiar with, Musashi no Ken, the Sword of Musashi. And it probably is pretty obvious, this is a side-scroller, rather a cute-looking little thing, kind of in the style of Super Mario Bros., only of course you have a sword. Musashi no Ken was based on a manga about a young kendo student, kendo being Japanese art of swordsmanship. You probably won't be surprised if I told you there's actually an animated TV series on the air at the time this game came out. In this game you travel across levels, avoiding various monsters and picking up swords, some of which are actually hidden in the various things that you can hit. You will also occasionally get power-ups, things that fill up your life bar, etc. And the whole time you have to keep up with your dog, which is racing there below you. The dog moves relatively slowly, so it's not really that difficult. One thing about this game is the controls are a little weird, and sometimes the platforming can be a bit more difficult than you think it should be. Additionally, the enemies can get quite heavy as well, especially the amount of things that just fall out of the sky on you. For example, the end of this level right here, I believe this is the second level. You have to avoid all those boulders while doing the platforming. It's actually kind of difficult and took me a few tries to get through this. I think perhaps this game sort of took the Mario formula and kind of made it just maybe a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. The game really isn't that fun simply because it involves so much memorization of exactly what is going to fall out of the sky on you. You can take like maybe 2 or 3 hits at most before you die. And here you see some of the more sort of frustrating platforming you'll be encountering in the game. Not really a great game, doesn't quite work. One thing that's a little odd is that after you get through, I believe it is 3 levels, it then becomes sort of like a little miniature fighting game. That's actually why you're collecting all the little swords and whatnot throughout these levels. You're saving up when you actually use them while you're fighting. I will admit I definitely have not mastered the controls during the sword fighting competition and have a very difficult time actually hitting the other guy before he hits me. I believe it's a 2 out of 3. Though if you do get past this, you'll actually go through some more side-scrolling levels and then a second competition, and then I believe that's pretty much the game. So this is a weird little game. I can't really recommend it. It tries to be a decent side-scroller but doesn't quite make it. From Toei Animation, it's Hokuto no Ken. And this is a video game based on the animated series, which we like to call Fist of the North Star. Please note that this is not the Fist of the North Star game that was released for the NES in the United States. That was actually Hokuto no Ken 2. And when you play this game, probably the first thing you'll say is, Jesus, this game is awful. Look at the character sprites when you kick them. They go flying through the air with their legs flailing. I have not been able to figure out what that little guy right there does. He always appears in that same section, but you can't seem to collect him or do anything with him. Now you can do a kick or a jump. When you hit someone, just like in the comic book, they actually explode. You can then grab that little word that comes out of the pink guys when you hit them. This will sort of power you up. Notice you get a little star up in the corner there whenever you hit one of these guys. People will throw things at you, you have to avoid them, you have a life bar there. And for those not familiar with the comic book and cartoon, this takes place in some kind of horrible post-apocalyptic world where lots of punks wander around killing people, and your job is to sort of beat them up repeatedly. Now once you power up all the way, you grab the last word there, suddenly blam, you sort of hulk out and your t-shirt gets all ripped. And you can go a little bit faster and do things like kick and punch while in the air, but it doesn't really make the game any better. And you know, unlike a lot of terrible games, this one is actually fun in sort of a stupid kind of way, at least for a few minutes. Part of the problem is that this level never really seems to end. You just sort of keep going until you eventually run out of hit points. It is identified as level 1 on the title screen, so I assume eventually you'll get to the end, but I've never been able to. Not to mention that when you die, you start at the very beginning of the level again. You just sort of go past the same buildings over and over again, fight the same 3 guys over and over again. There's absolutely no variation in this game whatsoever. Note that this game was actually developed by a company called Shoei Systems, same guys who designed Baltron under the name of Bears. I guess these guys kind of like to hide under different names. If these are the kind of games they're coming up with, I can't say I blame them. It looks like we're getting our ninja quota in early this episode. Yep, this is another Jajamaru game from Jaleco, Jajamaru's Daiboken, which is Jajamaru's Big Adventure. You might remember the last Jajamaru game. It was the princess had been kidnapped by this sort of pirate dude, and apparently the same thing has happened again. Now this game is actually a little different. The last Jajamaru game we saw mostly consisted of about 3 or 4 different levels, which simply repeated over and over again. This game is more like a Super Mario style scrolling deal. And in between every level, you actually encounter sort of an optional boss. I say he's optional because if you get killed, no big deal, you don't lose a life. If you defeat him, you get some bonus points. So this game actually alternates between scrolling levels and bosses. So the first level is a scroller, second level boss, so on and so forth, until you get to level 10, in which case the boss is the actual pirate guy himself. As in the previous Jajamaru game, you can find a variety of power-ups. You can also in this game find bad power-ups, such as little bombs that if you try to grab them, they'll explode on you. You battle enemies in the same way. You can jump on them, hit them with your little throwing stars. Well, here's sort of an invisibility power-up, which actually makes you temporarily invulnerable. You collect little gold coins. Really nothing has changed except for the sort of layout of the levels, because they're sort of long, horizontal scrolling levels, presumably under the influence of Super Mario Bros. And of course, one of the power-ups you can find is the gigantic frog. This guy will only last you part of the level now, because levels are somewhat longer than they used to be. But he can still pretty much plow through any enemy. This level's a little weird. It appears that it takes place in a city park of some sort. I'm not really sure exactly what the plot of this game is. Obviously you're trying to rescue a princess, but you're going through a lot of unusual places. This is the 9th level. There's the exit right down there at the bottom. I'll jump into it, and then I'll be fighting the final boss. And you actually get to fight him while on the giant frog. So for you fans of the giant ninja frog, this level will give you a bit more of a chance to actually use the guys, though this is actually harder than fighting him in the other game, because now he sort of jumps around and throws fireballs at you, more like a real boss. Rather, I guess he's throwing bombs at you technically, you throw fireballs at him. You have to hit him several times, he'll start getting turning a little red there, and then finally, blam, you have rescued the princess. And of course, after this, then you start again with actually some new levels. Not really sure how many levels there are altogether in this game. But clearly Jaleco is attempting to sort of update the series a little bit, from the single screen levels of the first game to the slightly larger levels of the second game to this one right here, which is almost becoming more and more like a traditional side-scrolling game. Certainly, I'd say that these Jajamru games are probably among Jaleco's better games. They've released some real stinkers for the Famicom. These games are not great, but they're a lot of fun. I mean, certainly there are much worse platformers on the Famicom at this point. From Namco, we now have Sky Kid, and this was released the same day as Jajamru no Daiboken. And if you look at the little cover shot we showed earlier, you'll see this is actually the 18th game from Namco released for the Famicom so far, thus making them far and away the most prolific publisher of Famicom games other than Nintendo themselves. Namco had been releasing games since September of 1984, so that translates into almost a game a month. Sky Kid is a port of their 1984 arcade game. This is the arcade version here. The Famicom version has not quite as good colors, but otherwise looks pretty similar to the arcade version. The object is to control your little red Barentsau plane, pick up a bomb, which for some reason is lying in the middle of the road, and drop it on some kind of fortress or something similar. Why they couldn't actually supply you with a bomb before you started your mission is anybody's guess. Interestingly, when this game came out in the United States about a year later, it was actually released by Sunsoft. Not sure exactly why this was, but my guess would be that Namco was releasing so many games themselves in the US. At the time, apparently Nintendo of the United States had a 5-game per year limit for publishers. So presumably Namco sold off the US rights to Sunsoft. In terms of gameplay, Sky Kid reminds me an awful lot of Choplifter. Sort of fly around, dodge things on the ground, dodge other airplanes, and occasionally pick something up. And just like Choplifter, I don't really like this game. I can't say exactly why. I had a hard time controlling the plane. The enemy planes seem hell-bent on performing little kamikaze attacks and crashing into you. You have a little loop maneuver you can do, but I didn't really find it all that helpful in getting rid of enemy planes. So based on my somewhat limited gameplay, I'm going to have to say this game really does not impress me very much. Most of the Famicom disc games released so far have been by Nintendo, but now that we're starting to see third-party publishers release them, we're going to see some kind of weird stuff. For example, I Am a Teacher, Super Mario no Sweater, or Super Mario no Sita as it actually says in Japanese. And this is not a game per se, but rather an instructional game on how to make a Super Mario sweater. This game was published by Royal, otherwise known as Royal Kogyu, which I believe is a pretty decent-sized Japanese sewing machine manufacturer, and they also sell knitting supplies and that sort of thing. And basically you simply select the kind of sweater you want to make, put in the size, the dimensions, and so on and so forth, and it'll give you patterns for making the sweater. Now, I'm not sure exactly who developed this game, but I've heard that Nintendo themselves actually may have done it. This game is interesting if for no other reason than this is the first time I believe that Nintendo has let another game company use its characters such as Super Mario. They would obviously do this again in the future with games like Mario is Missing. Well, in terms of a gamer's perspective, there's really not much to look at here. However, I suppose that if you read Japanese and are interested in knitting, maybe you should take a look at this. You can actually make a sweater featuring Super Mario or other characters from the games. But this is certainly sort of indicative of the kind of unusual stuff we'll be seeing for the FDS in the future. Our last game for the month of August is Kendo Senshi Z Gundam Hot Scramble. And yes, this is a game based on the incredibly popular Japanese anime Gundam, specifically the second series, Mobile Suit Z Gundam. You can go ahead and read the scroll there, which describes the basic plot to you, but Gundam is some sort of overly complicated space opera involving different armies that dress up in robot outfits and shoot each other. You can tell this game is for hardcore Gundam geeks because it actually gives you descriptions of all the Gundams that appear in the game, as well as things like how much they weigh and what kind of engine they have. Since this is a Bandai game, you're probably thinking, oh no, this was developed by Toza, the same guys who did those horrible games like Chubby Cherub. But no, this is developed by Game Studios. And if you haven't heard of them, well, they were actually the studio that was founded by Masanobu Endo, the same guy who created Xevious after he left Namco. And for a Bandai game, it's actually pretty decent. It starts out with a first-person pseudo 3D shoot-'em-up phase here. You're actually flying over the surface of Earth, which apparently someone has very conveniently painted different colors of green squares. You battle some enemy mobile suits, then you fly up into outer space and battle some more. Once you shoot down enough of them, you eventually approach an enemy ship. And these sections of the game actually works pretty well. There I'm headed to the space station. And then the game becomes a clone of Thexter of all things. In fact, this handles and looks an awful lot like Thexter, including the ability to transform between a jet plane and your robot guy. And just like Thexter, it can be a little bit tricky to control. You can actually find power-ups in this game. Once you get through the maze, you attack the boss, which apparently is nothing more than a generator of some sort. And unfortunately, you have to transform into your jet plane to do this. You actually can't reach him with your robot suit guy because he can't jump high enough. So you're forced to awkwardly fly around this little tiny room in jet plane form. It's really not much fun. After that, you're back to Earth, blow up some more mobile suits, go into space, and do the whole thing again. Altogether, there's 25 levels, but the levels seem to be pretty similar as far as I can tell. Slightly different layout of the space stations, and the enemies get harder and harder. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot of variation in this game. This was one of the first Gundam games released for a home system. There had been one on the MSX before this, but it certainly wasn't the last, because they would over the years make many dozens of Gundam games. I mean, really more than anybody could possibly want. I honestly think that the Gundam game franchise probably generates more revenue than the GDP of a lot of small European nations. It's really quite absurd how many of these things they actually put out. This one, though, is certainly not bad, and I guess we can say it's pretty good for a Bandai game. We now enter the month of August with ASO, Armored Scrum Object, better known in the US as Alpha Mission. This is the first game published for the Famicom by SNK, and it's a port of their 1985 arcade shooter. It was around 1985 that arcade shoot-'em-ups started introducing sort of unusual versions of power-up. For example, Gradius would be one good example. This game is perhaps not so well known as Gradius, but also has a rather strange system for collecting power-ups. You have to bomb the little pyramids, and you'll find a letter underneath them. Collecting the letter will then give you some sort of power-up. For example, E's give you energies, M's upgrade your missiles, the L will upgrade your laser, and so on and so forth. You will also find power-ups that will give you access to various special weapons. And the special weapons is what the energy is used for. Every time you fire your special weapon, it uses up a certain amount of energy, and you have the energy counter down there in the lower right-hand corner. Then at any time, you can go into your special weapon screen and select which kind of special weapon you want to use. As you use it, it'll use up energy. We are now ready to fight the first boss. I find that the fire is quite useful taking care of this guy, so we'll select that. And now we shoot a constant stream of like hot fire, which we keep on this guy, and then I'll take care of him pretty quickly. As you can see, the energy is going down steadily. Once we're done, we want to turn off the special weapon. And then we're on to level 2, which actually looks quite a bit like level 1. There's also various negative power-ups. For example, the F, you don't want to hit that. Or there's the backwards E. That will decrease your energy. Once you get a bit further in the game, you'll probably have collected quite a few special weapons. We'll take a look at some of them here. As you can see, there's quite a few. Some are actually less interesting than they sound. Like nuclear sounds pretty cool. It's basically a bomb that'll destroy any in-air enemies on the screen. But it really doesn't look very impressive. You would think with something with a name like nuclear would give you a better screen than that, but I guess, the Famicom is only limited to certain graphic capabilities. The Octo is quite useful. It shoots off lasers in 8 directions. But one thing about this game is that this all sounds very fun, but I think the fact that these special weapons drain so much energy so quickly really makes them not very useful. This means that you have all these cool weapons, but you really can't use them that frequently. Maybe we've been spoiled by modern shooters, but in this game you'll be using your regular laser 90% of the time, which really drains some of the fun out of it. A nice game, but would be a lot more fun if you could actually use these weapons more frequently. From Pony Canyon of all people, we have Super Pitfall. Despite what this screen says, this game was actually programmed by Micronix. And of course, this is a sequel to Pitfall and Pitfall 2, two of the greatest games for the Atari 2600, originally published by Activision, as you can see here. Pitfall 1 was really one of the very first horizontal platform type games. Originally it came out in 1982. It was followed up by a much larger, more ambitious sequel, Pitfall 2: The Lost Caverns, in 1984. Perhaps the last great game for the Atari 2600. Pitfall 2 was really a little bit ahead of its time. Rather than the strict linear motion of the first Pitfall, you could explore a rather large cavern in virtually any way that you wanted. As I mentioned last episode, this type of gameplay would later evolve into games like Metroid. If you want an example of how to piss off fans of a particular series, look no further than Super Pitfall. On the surface, it greatly resembles Pitfall 2, in fact it's almost a remake. You start off above ground and descend into an enormous cavern in search of your lost niece. However, you can tell this game doesn't have your best interest in heart, because the very first ladder that you climb down drops you onto a pit of spikes. I suppose that's some sort of general rule of game design, is you shouldn't put some kind of inescapable death trap, 1 second into the beginning of the game. Well, once you're safely underground, you'll find yourself exploring a vast network full of caverns, passages, tunnels, ladders, lakes, etc., etc., just like in Pitfall 2. Obviously, the graphic style of the game has been completely reworked. This looks much more Nintendo-esque, and people have sort of commented on the fact that Pitfall Harry now carries a gun and has a mustache sort of like Mario. Here's one of the cooler parts of the game. You can find a hole in this lake that'll drop you down to the very bottom of the cavern. This sort of gives you an idea of approximately how big the world is. So far the game looks fine, however once you start playing you'll realize there are some problems. Super Pitfall has some very unpleasant sequences in it. For example, trying to catch these swinging vines. This of course is something taken straight out of the first Pitfall game, and while in the first Pitfall grabbing on the vines was quite easy, in this game it's very difficult and you'll often find yourself falling onto the level below. I guess I'll try it again here. No? Still no luck. You just sort of pass right through the vine unless you grab it just right so you grab hold of the end. Something else new to Super Pitfall is the idea of locked doors. Yes, unlike Pitfall 1 where you can pretty much explore anywhere you want. In Pitfall 2 you find doors, and in order to unlock them you have to collect the little symbols, the diamond, the heart, the spade, and the club that you see in the upper right hand corner there. Now in theory this wouldn't be so bad, except for the fact that virtually everything in this game is hidden. That's right, every single object you need to complete the game is actually invisible. You can only uncover it by jumping up in the air near it, then it'll appear. Additionally, in order to get to the second part of the game, you have to find the teleporter, which is actually hidden inside of an enemy. Jumping into that vulture will now take you to the next part, which looks exactly like the first part at first glance. This gives the game a very sort of Tower of Juaga kind of feel, where in order to complete the game you'll have to find a number of completely randomly hidden items. In other words, it's one of those run around aimlessly until you get lucky kind of games that Japanese gamers seem to like so much. There's another hidden item right there that you need to get before you can actually finish the game. And here I'm finding my first objective, or one of the objectives, which is my niece's pet leopard, Quick Claw, who looks much cuter in this game than he did in the original Pitfall 2. But once you've gotten through all the stuff on this first hidden level, you have to find the second hidden level, which is actually will teleport you to some kind of like strange parallel universe. And this is done by basically just jumping into a random wall. And here the monsters are much scarier and much more difficult. Again, there was really nothing like this part of the game at all in the original Pitfall 2 game. Well, eventually you'll find your niece, and then you have to backtrack all the way to the very beginning where you started. So all in all, Micronic's typically sloppy programming, the kind of bad controls, and the general unplayability of the game really resulted in a game that most Pitfall fans did not like, and I can certainly see why. I really think the problems of this game go far beyond the redesign of Pitfall Harry. The game itself is really not a lot of fun to play. In the US, this game was released by Activision themselves, and I'm sure this did nothing to improve their reputation. At this time, Activision was releasing some rather mediocre games, as we'll see a little bit later in this episode. Our next game here is a cute little puzzle game called Banana. This game sort of resembles Dig Dug in a way, as we'll see in just a moment. Your character is, I believe, a mole who has to dig around underground passages and collect various kinds of food. He also needs to collect his wife and then together find the exit door. Gravity plays a major part in this game, as anything without any firm ground underneath it, including yourself, will fall. Unlike some of these games, however, falling rocks won't actually harm you. The worst they can do is block your way because you can't climb over them. Another important factor in this game is the ladders. Ladders are actually the only way that you can use to move up in this game. It's actually quite easy to find yourself in a position where you've lost a level because you've gotten all the way down to a certain point and then you cannot climb up again because there are no ladders within reach. For example, if I go down here, I'm pretty much stuck. I'll have to hit the A and B button, which will end the level. They make that weird little face when you end a level for some reason. Throughout the game you collect various kinds of fruit, including bananas, and sometimes these will actually give you bonus items. Banana is a very cute little game, but maybe it's most noted for being the very first Famicom game published by Victor Music Industries. This may have actually been their first video game ever, I'm not sure. Later they became known as Victor Interactive. Victor Music Industries is a subsidiary of the giant entertainment and electronics company JVC. They're the guys who, among other things, invented the VHS videotape. Unlike a lot of other entertainment companies like Pony Canyon, Victor actually had its own development team. This game was developed by Victor themselves. Probably the most well-known series of video games from Victor is the Harvest Moon games. Victor Interactive eventually got bought by a company called Marvelous Entertainment, who today still publishes the many Harvest Moon games that still come out. At any rate, back to Banana. Here we can see one of the slightly later levels, one that also has multiple doors and multiple ladders. You have to be very, very careful on these later levels. It's quite easy to find yourself in a position where you're not able to finish the level. This right here is one of the much later levels, I think well after level 100, maybe level 101 or so. As you can see, the level is quite huge, requires several screens, and when you first play this level, it's not going to be at all obvious how to actually get through it. Here we have an even later level. I think there's maybe 105 levels altogether. Again, these levels will take quite a bit of sort of wandering around, seeing what it looks like, and then very careful planning before you'll actually be able to complete the level. These late levels do obtain a Lode Runner-like difficulty level. The closest we get to a classic game in this episode is this title, Hudson's Takahashi Meijin no Bukenjima, or as it is known in the West, Adventure Island. The history behind this game is actually quite odd. It's an altered port of Sega's 1986 arcade game, Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy was developed by a company called West One, and through a rather unique sounding arrangement, West One controlled the rights to the actual game, while Sega controlled the characters and the name Wonder Boy. Thus, West One was able to license the game to Hudson as long as new characters were created. Hudson's solution to the need for a new main character was very unusual. They decided to base the new character on an actual Hudson employee, Toshiyuki Takahashi, who was also quite well known for being a very good video game player, possessing the ability to hit the fire button 16 times a second while playing Star Soldier. Thus, the new character was named Takahashi Meijin, which can be translated to Master Takahashi. Wonder Boy and Adventure Island ended up being developed in two separate franchises, with the Wonder Boy games veering more into medieval fantasy settings, while Adventure Island kept the prehistoric island approach. The history of the series is somewhat confusing, so we'll do a quick rundown of the games. Well, the whole thing started with the release of Sega West One's Wonder Boy in the arcades in 1986. Sega released a straight home version of the game for the Sega Master System, and then Hudson Soft released the game that we know as Adventure Island for the Famicom. At this point, the two series, Wonder Boy and Adventure Island, pretty much diverged completely. The first Wonder Boy sequel, Sega West One's Wonder Boy in Monsterland, hit the arcades in 1987. Sega once again ported it to the Sega Master System. However, Hudson decided to release a version of the game for their own console, the PC Engine. Once again, they completely changed the characters in the name and released it as Bakuru Man World. If that wasn't odd enough, the Brazilian video game company Tectoy released a substantially worked version of the game in Brazil as Monica no Castelo do Drago. And finally, Jaleco released an unauthorized and completely blatant ripoff of the game called Sayuki World. Strangely enough, the sequel, Sayuki World 2, which was not based on any Wonder Boy game, was completely reworked and released in the United States as Wampum. Next up was the arcade game from Sega, Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair. Sega decided to port this to their new home console, the Mega Drive, known in the US as the Genesis, as Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair. Hudson decided to release this game on the PC Engine once again as a straight port, Wonder Boy 3. However, in the US, on the US version of the PC Engine known as the TurboGrafx 16, they dropped Wonder Boy and called it simply Monster Lair. Now it starts to get a little confusing. Sega had released the first two Wonder Boy games for the Sega Master System, but not the newest one, Wonder Boy 3. So, they came up with another game called Wonder Boy 3 Dragon's Trap, which is a completely different game than Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair. This was released directly to the Sega Master System. And of course, Hudson Soft wanted versions of these games as well, so once again they dropped Wonder Boy and released the game on the TurboGrafx 16 as Dragon's Curse, and, if you can believe this, on the PC Engine as Adventure Island. Of course, this Adventure Island has nothing to do all with the series of games that came out on the Famicom. The next Wonder Boy game was released directly to the Sega Mega Drive. Now you might think it would be called Wonder Boy 4, but rather Sega decided to call it Wonder Boy 5 Monster World 3. This came out on the US version of the Mega Drive, the Sega Genesis, with a simplified title, Wonder Boy in Monster World, And of course, Hudson also ported the game to the PC Engine, calling it Dynastic Hero. And finally, Sega came out with one last sequel. Of course, in this game, they themselves dropped Wonder Boy, and the game was simply called Monster World 4. Of course, while they were releasing their own versions of the Wonder Boy games to the PC Engine, Hudson was also coming up with more Adventure Island games for the Famicom. 1991 saw Adventure Island 2. Next up, for the brand new Super Nintendo or Super Famicom system, they released Super Adventure Island. After that, it was back to the Famicom for Adventure Island 3. And in the middle of all this, Hudson decides to release an Adventure Island game for the PC Engine and TurboGrafx-16 called New Adventure Island. Finally, in 1994, Hudson releases the Japan-only Takahashi Meijin no Bukenjiman 4, and the following year the whole thing comes to a close with the release of Super Adventure Island 2 for the Super Famicom and Super NES. Hopefully everyone was able to follow all of that. Well, let's take a look at the actual game. For the US version, the character was renamed Master Higgins, which seems sort of inappropriate for a guy wearing a grass skirt and living in the jungle. However, this game is certainly filled with those sorts of little anachronistic touches, as using a skateboard as a means of transportation. Adventure Island seems very much dead at Super Mario Bros. You travel through a series of worlds, each consisting of exactly 4 levels, and at the end of each world you meet the same rather easy boss. It's a simple matter to avoid this guy's projectiles and hit him on the head with your stone hammer. Throughout the game, Master Higgins encounters the usual moving platforms, deadly drops, and jumping enemies. However, while Super Mario Bros. Is relatively flat, Adventure Island contains a lot of hills and valleys. You're often moving up or down at the same time moving from side to side in this game. It's also somewhat harder than Super Mario Bros., and part of this is due to your constantly diminishing life bar, which is filled up by grabbing the fruits that appear, which are usually floating in the air. This is not usually a problem, but there are areas where fruit's pretty scarce, and you'll need to advance very quickly while grabbing all the fruit that you can, and quite a bit of precision jumping is required for this game. Adventure Island is hardly perfect, the levels do get repetitive after a while, but compared to the other post-Mario platformers we've been seeing, such as Atlantis no Nazo, Musashi no Ken, and Super Pitfall, it's very refreshing to play a high-quality game such as this one. When you factor in Adventure Island's very nice graphics, usable controls, and generally very playable level design, you'll see this is probably the best Mario Brothers-esque platform we've had since Super Mario Bros. Itself. Of all the games we're playing this episode, this is the one that stands out the most in terms of quality, so it's definitely something you want to check out. Well, here's sort of a strange one, King's Knight. If you were to look at the cover of this and notice that it's by Square, you might think, wow, this is like an early RPG from Square or something, but once you actually start playing it, you'll find it's basically a shoot-'em-up. Granted, it's a very odd shoot-'em-up. This is sort of in the RPG style shoot-'em-up as in Galg, only this one is probably a bit more easier to understand. The game is actually reasonably simple. King's Knight was actually developed by Bits Laboratory, the same guys who did Bokosuka Wars. And just like that earlier game, King's Knight is a little strange. There really isn't anything else like it. You cruise through levels, blowing up anything that stands in your way, and looking for various items. For example, those special runic symbols, they're like a little dot with the other dots around it. You need to pick up those, and along the way also try to get items that will actually sort of level up your character. For example, things that'll make you faster, give you better shields. As you see, I'm level 7 after completing this. Then you do exactly the same thing with the next character, which is a wizard. Occasionally you'll actually uncover a little dungeon area, such as this one right here. Again, you can just sort of pick up some more power-ups while you're down here. Altogether there's 4 characters, and they have rather strange names. There was the knight Rayjack, this wizard is Kaliva, also there's the monster Barusa, and Toby the thief. As you can see, you actually have a life meter, which gets drained pretty quickly whenever you get hit by enemy fire. Also, there's those little arrows. Hitting an up arrow will give you a little bit of your health back. Hitting a down arrow will lower your health. Unfortunately, especially in the last 3 characters, there's a lot more down arrows than there are up arrows. As a result, you can sometimes find yourself sort of getting trapped, where you're sort of stuck to go over a down arrow and lower your health. Well, how does King's Knight fare strictly as a shoot-'em-up? Well, really not very good. Your character has pretty limited mobility because of all the little islands and mountains and trees and whatnot. You can blow your way through those, but it takes a while. Also, you don't really seem to get much along lines of power-ups, so in terms of just sort of shoot-'em-up playability, this is not very good. Now, once you've gotten all 4 of your characters leveled up properly, you then go on to this final level. In this case, 3 of my characters actually died, so I only have 1, the wizard, left. No matter how powerful your characters are, I think you actually need all 4 characters to get through this level. If there's one nice thing about this game, is that if you didn't really do that well with certain characters, you can actually go back and keep playing them until you get them leveled up the way you want them. So if a character has died, you can make another attempt. So while King's Knight is an interesting idea, it never really kind of comes together as a game, and it's certainly not really indicative of the kind of quality games that Square would release much later. Well, only 2 weeks after Super Pitfall, Pony Canyon releases its first FDS game, Kaneko Monogatari: The Adventures of Shatran. The title means literally kitten story, and this video game is based off the movie of the same name. This film was released in the US as The Adventures of Milo and Otis, basically about a cute little cat and puppy that journey across the countryside, looking for their home, or something like that. This is actually Pony Canyon's second game about a little kitten, the first being Onyanko Town from back in 1985. This game is certainly more fun than that game, and it's not nearly as offensive as Super Pitfall either. This game might be intended for kids. It's a pretty simple platformer in which you sort of walk around, jump, avoid enemies. Nothing to get too excited about, but it's hardly a bad game either. You collect apples. I'm not really sure why, probably they have some sort of use later in the game, as well as the occasional egg. You can also drop the apples on top of the mice, which will kill them. The graphics are reasonably cute, and the controls are actually pretty good. This was developed by, or rather co-developed by companies called Marionette and SDS, about which I really don't know anything. I don't think that either of them ever went on to do anything interesting or very notable. Now, aside from apples, you also collect eggs, and there are a few sort of like power-up-like items. For example, collecting a bottle of milk will give you temporary invincibility. And you can just plow through enemies. Otherwise, you have no offensive capabilities in this game, other than dropping an apple on their head. Occasionally, you will come across an egg with a letter on it. For example, this one says E. Once you collect all 4 letters to spell help, Otis will appear. He will run in front of you and destroy any enemies that he happens to hit. You have to be careful though, because if he touches you, he will kill you as well. And here's the end of Scene 2. Not really sure how many levels there are in this game. I didn't play it all the way through. Some take place during the day, some take place at night. I don't know that this game ever really sort of follows the script of the film. I think it more or less just sort of uses the character in pretty much a generic little platformer. Maybe the cutest part is when Milo has to cross a lake or something in a little box. Of course, a single drop of rain will kill him for some reason. And not to mention the rather high-flying fish. Now, isn't it really cute when he puts his head down and has to duck and hide from enemies? That's just really adorable. If nothing else, The Adventures of Shatran is cute, reasonably playable, and really not that bad of a platformer. We have another Namco title here, Super Xevious. and this is obviously a sequel to their arcade game, Xevious, though this particular version of Super Xevious, Gamp no Nazo, is actually an original for the Famicom. This game should not be confused with the arcade Super Xevious, which is basically just a slightly reworked version of the original Xevious. Something to note, this game was not designed by Masanobu Endo. He had actually left Namco at this time to start his own company. This game looks, plays, and sounds an awful lot like the original Xevious, however there are some differences, and you'll actually see the first one coming up here. I noticed some of the enemies and whatnot are new. The actual layouts look quite similar. The game pretty much plays the same. You have the bomb, you have the laser. However, once you get to a certain point on this first level here, you'll notice something, which is you actually start going past areas you've already passed. In fact, we'll notice here that we've come across some stuff that's already been bombed. This is actually the very beginning of the game right here. Something Super Xevious does is each level will pretty much loop infinitely, unless you figure out how to leave the level. There's sort of a little riddle built into each level, which is usually something completely random. In this case, you have to actually fly through a particular cloud, then suddenly you'll be on the second level. This can make the game, I suppose, either, a bit less enjoyable or a bit more fun to try to figure out all the puzzles. I guess it really sort of depends on your state of mind. Something else that's been added to the game is power-ups. Occasionally this little ship will fly by, shoot him, and he'll spit out 3 balls. Depending on which color you grab, you'll get a certain power-up. In this case, I grabbed the extra-wide bomb sights. Here's the one of the first bosses. You have to shoot him right in the middle, and you can actually fly into him. And the next level takes place inside the boss. Again, this level will loop you around infinitely unless you have to destroy certain objects on the ground in order to get out of it. So this gives a bit of variety to Xevious. I mean, the gameplay is still basically the same, but at least there's sort of different kinds of backgrounds. Now we exit the ship, and we're back on the ground. This level could be a bit tricky because you can't always see everything. Sometimes enemies are hidden in the bushes. And this game actually does get sort of hard near the end, I mean, more so than the original Xevious. This especially becomes true around the level where you have to go through underground tunnels. I will admit I actually had not gotten through this level at the time I had made this video. So how do we feel about Super Xevious? Well, I guess depending on your viewpoint, it could either be a slightly improved version of the original game, or it could be a classic that was kind of screwed up by adding a bunch of unnecessary elements. Either way, it's worth giving it a look. And it's Ghostbusters, a port of Activision's Commodore 64 game, based on the movie. And listen to this. Yeah, isn't that nice? Well, this is a weird little game. As I mentioned, it was based on an American computer game, which came out in 1984. And even though it doesn't really seem like it, the basic structure is kind of similar to an RPG. You need to start by buying some equipment, and then you go around sucking up ghosts. The main object of the game is to make enough money to buy the equipment necessary to take on the big ghost at the end. Now, in order to actually get from place to place, you have to drive there. Once you've arrived, you can then buy some items, and in order to capture ghosts, you'll need a capture beam and something to keep them in. I prefer the Super Trap because you can keep an unlimited number of ghosts in there. Then you find a place that's haunted, drive there again, and deal with the ghosts. Then you just repeat this until the boss ghost, Gozer, shows up. You look more like army guys than Ghostbusters. Use your little proton beams there to grab a hold of the ghosts, and then once you've got them all, suck them into the ghost trap. You get some cash for this, and really you want to try to get all 4 ghosts into the ghost trap at the same time because you'll get the most cash that way. Then you wander around, find the next building that's haunted, so on and so forth. You can also buy a ghost alarm that makes it easier to find which buildings are haunted. Now, as it happens, the original Commodore game was designed by David Crane, who was a pretty well-known game designer back in the day for Atari and then later for Activision, probably most well-known for, of all things, the Pitfall games. As it turns out, this game was not originally intended to be a Ghostbusters game. It was originally a project called Car Wars. Apparently at some point Activision got the license to Ghostbusters, so they did some work and converted it very quickly into the Ghostbusters game you see here. That might have something to do with the reason why this game is really not that good. Ghostbusters seems to belong to the old school design theory that you can make a bigger game simply by taking several smaller games and sort of joining them together. Ghostbusters has some very basic inventory management type stuff. It has a very simple driving game, and it has a very simple action game where you try to capture the ghosts, but the problem is individually none of these sections really work. The driving game is not at all exciting. The sections where you have to catch ghosts is boring and repetitive, and there's really no reason why you can't catch 4 at a time, unless the ghosts don't stray low enough to get caught by your beams. In 1984 you could probably still get away with this kind of game to a certain extent, but in 1986, not so much. After things like Metroid had come out, what really was the point of a game like this? And believe it or not, this was released for the Nintendo in the United States in 1988. This must have seemed like a relic from another era. If Ghostbusters were just a little dull, that would be one thing, but it actually gets worse from here. Once you've got enough money, you can buy the correct items. You can go face Gozer himself in the middle of the main screen. Then of course we get to one of the all-time worst video game levels. This is almost certainly the worst thing we've ever seen for the Famicom so far. At this point you need to climb up several flights of stairs in order to get to the top and fight Gozer. However, you move by hitting your A button. Hitting the A button will let you take one single step. That's right, you don't use the D-pad move around, you have to hit the A button repeatedly to slowly march across the floor and up the stairs. All the while you're being harassed by ghosts. Keep in mind that you're so incredibly slow moving you have pretty much zero maneuverability, so the ghosts can pretty much come down and hit you whenever they want. You can buy some items that make this level a little bit easier, but there's no way this could possibly be anything but completely annoying. Seriously, the completely bizarre control scheme almost really ruins the entire game. I mean, you can play the first part all you want, and it's really not that bad, but once you get to this, you really don't want to continue playing. Probably only curiosity to see the final level is what would actually cause anyone to keep on playing through this thing till they got all the way to the top. After you die, even the game admits that it's sort of a matter of luck more than anything else. So Ghostbusters basically boils down to being a mediocre game with a really terrible final level added on the end. However, this game must have sold well. It was ported to lots of different systems. I can only assume this is based solely on the popularity of the movie. Our last game this episode is another disappointing one. It's Space Hunter from Kemco, which so far has released some consistently mediocre games. Now the weird thing about this game is it sort of resembles Metroid in like a weird way, maybe like an extremely bad version of Metroid. In the sense that you are some female space hunter, which is actually what Samus Aran was originally called in the Metroid manual, a space hunter, who runs around this weird planet dealing with aliens and looking for something. This game is completely in Japanese, so it's sort of difficult for a Westerner to really know what's going on here, but there are several planets you can visit. Apparently aliens are attacking Earth. You can sort of see little missiles heading towards Earth, or whatever planet that is in the opening screen there. And you're this female character, and, well, you get killed a lot first of all, but you choose the planet that you want to go to, and then while you're there, there's all these little rooms you can enter. And the game is sort of like a cross between Metroid and Bomberman, only of course it's not very good. You can lay bombs, which will explode only horizontally, at least at first. Unlike Metroid, however, there is no scrolling in between screens. Since your character is sort of hard to control, you often find yourself accidentally hitting the edge of a screen and thus going into a new screen. This makes the game even more annoying. The screen is needlessly cluttered up by that blue border and then the interface that shows you things like your password. Why would you need to see that all the time? So anyway, you use your sort of little rocket thing you're sitting on to propel around these little space dungeons, avoiding the enemies. Occasionally you can blow them up using your little Bomberman-like bombs there. Though it's, since the bombs only go horizontally and not vertically, it's rather difficult. If you enter these dungeons, you have to kill off a couple enemies. Again, quite difficult because the explosions don't go past maze walls. Pick up little items, and when you defeat them, you'll get what appears to be some sort of clue or quest item. You can also pick up other weapons occasionally, but they seem to run out of energy reasonably quickly. Despite the fact that there are 6 different planets and one looks fiery and one looks icy and so on, there's not really much of a difference between them. The only thing is sort of the color and the texture of the bricks. But really the design of this game has pretty much zero character. On this screen right here you can switch weapons. This is sort of a wave beam type gun. It's easier to kill enemies, but it runs out of juice really quick. As you can see, the power is going down, but it actually disappeared long before the power ran out. And part of the issue, of course, is, I don't know really how to play this game, but regardless, from what I've seen, there's no way this could possibly be a good game, and quite frankly, it doesn't really seem to be well remembered even in Japan, as far as I can tell. There are a lot of sort of like hidden Japanese classics for the Famicom. This game would definitely not fall into that category. This is sort of one of those very minor games which is really better left unplayed. However, one day after this game was released, Konami released one of their all-time classic games, and we'll be taking a look at that one at the beginning of next episode. Well, another 15 games down, and we'll do 15 more again next time. How did this episode fare in terms of ninjas and shoot-'em-ups? Well, obviously, Jajamaru no Daiboken had some ninjas in it, and Musashi no Ken, I think, was actually ninja-less, even though it certainly felt like it could have used some. There were some little pink guys jumping around who I thought resembled ninjas, but may have actually been guys in pink kendo outfits. In terms of shoot-'em-ups, there was certainly ASO and Super Xevious, and I suppose also King's Knight and Sky Kid are sort of unusual shoot-'em-ups. So join us next episode where we'll see Konami unleash one of their popular franchises and also some pretty cool titles from Capcom and Hudson.